So I'll be honest, I'm a little bit of a foodie. I like to eat. I like to spend my evenings in front of the TV and just chowing down on whatever, whether it's pistachios or some kind of chips and salsa or other kind of dip. I'm good with any kind of dip, honestly, or something sweet. Sometimes I like to make myself some cookies. You know, honestly, if I'm really honest, I eat probably too much. And Chelsea's the one that does most of the cooking around our house, but occasionally when I step in to try to help out, I try to get on Pinterest and look up something interesting that would be yummy. And I have quickly realized over time that, you know, the reason she doesn't make a lot of the stuff that I find is because they're a little bit complicated. They take time, they take effort, they take, going through all the ingredients and making sure. I always have to ask her whenever I do take over cooking, like, what does it mean to knead the dough? Like, different terms. What is this seasoning that it's calling for? I don't see that in our spice cabinet, Is that a combination of things? Is it something that we don't have? Is it something that I can replace it with? I don't understand these things, and she often has to chip in to help me understand what ingredients go together with what in order to make it palatable or to make it the way it's supposed to be. And I'll admit, I spend a little too long on Pinterest at times when I'm trying to find stuff that I should be cooking, looking up and penning recipes that I shouldn't have any business making, because I'm a foodie. I like to eat good food. I'm looking forward to March Madness and making my simple but amazing buffalo chicken dip and eating far too much of it. All right. Food is good. It sometimes takes a little more effort than we would like in order to make it the way it should, but it's pretty good. Here's an interesting question. How would you learn how to cook if the only thing you ever learned about food was food poisoning? Right? We live in a culture that has hypersexualized women's bodies and men's minds. And I don't know if you've noticed, but sexuality itself has morphed into society's defining feature. It has been elevated to be the pinnacle of your identity. Simply put, it's become one of the biggest idols of our culture. Now, what was once a gift from God designed with a specific purpose has now become the ultimate pursuit, permeating every aspect of life. I mean, you can't get on Instagram, YouTube, watch sports, listen to music, or even go to school without being bombarded by messages that's just saturated with sexuality. It's like everything is about sex, even when it's not. And we've been taught to see relationships as something that they're not, rather than as something pure and holy and distinct the way God designed. Many of us use all kinds of relationships, whether with family members, friends, acquaintances, but especially romantic relationships, as a means to satisfy a legitimate need we all have in an illegitimate way. See, just as we need nourishment from food, although this probably isn't the most nourishing, we all need nourishment that comes from food. Relationships also are meant to be nurturing, fulfilling, enriching, yet too often the way that we view and use the relationships in our lives gives us relationship poisoning rather than nourishment, right? We rush into wrong relationships to meet the needs that we have. We lean on them as an emotional crutch. We nurture them for our own self-validation, and we give too much of ourselves prematurely, ironically, because it makes us feel more mature. We look for acceptance in them, perhaps because we lack it in other areas. We lose ourselves in them, probably because we fail to recognize our own worth and value. And these relationships never end well, and they often cost us a lot in the process. They result in heartbreak, feeling lost, and even more unsure of ourselves than ever before. So, for the next few weeks, we're going to talk about how we can shift our focus from what our culture focuses too heavily on to what God has called us to. And let's be real for a minute. We live in a physical world with spiritual bodies, meaning you have a physical body, but you also have a spiritual soul. And we have an enemy and forces working against those of us who follow Jesus. We are in a fight for our lives, and unless we wake up and lean into the Spirit of God living inside of us, we are destined to follow into the traps and deceptions and distractions the enemy has set for us. So let's not fall for it. Let's not buy the lies. Let's instead look past all that in order to truly live up to the full potential that each one of us has to step into the kingdom work God has prepared in advance for us to do. You know that feeling when you remember something embarrassing that happened a long time ago and you're just as embarrassed about it now as you were the moment that it happened? One of those moments for me was when I was in middle school and going into high school, even right on that 8th grade freshman year border. There was a girl that I really liked, and I was just trying to impress her by any means necessary, meaning like at church camp, when we were at the pool, I would belly flop, do all these stupid show-offy things to try to garner attention by any means necessary. It's like my goal was to be the most obnoxious person there, because at least then she'd notice me. Stupid strategy, but it is what I was like at that age. And I remember even like saying things with friends that I wouldn't ordinarily say. I was acting out of character whenever she was around. It was just completely obvious that I was trying to impress her in everything that I was doing. And as I think back on it, like in the moment, I remember thinking I was embarrassed, like, because, oh, why did I just say that? Oh, I'm acting dumb, stop acting dumb. And then I'd say something dumb, right? But even now looking back on it, I am just as much, if not even more embarrassed now of my behavior then than I was at the moment. Maybe you've been there when it comes to dating or relationships. Maybe things didn't work out with someone that you liked. Maybe you can't seem to get that potential significant other's attention. Maybe you've never even been in a relationship. Regardless, the next couple of weeks are for all of us. While I understand that fewer people, especially your age, use the term dating to describe a romantic relationship, maybe you use other terms like you're just hanging out, or maybe you're just in a situationship. Maybe you're just talking, or maybe you're still trying to convince your best friend that you and someone else are just friends, right? However you want to call it. Just so that we're all on the same page over the next few weeks, we're going to use the term dating and define it as being in a relationship, however you would label it, where the other person means more to you than just being a good friend, right? We want to help you date well. This isn't one of those series that says you should never date, although you should have a tremendous amount of wisdom in all of your relationships, especially when you are sharing more of yourself personally, emotionally, and you need to be picking these people wisely and be going about it in a wise way. So while we're not saying you shouldn't do it at all, there is a time and place for it, and it does require wisdom. And we want you to be able to date well. Some of you still might not be interested in talking about such a personal topic because, well, maybe you're in a situation that doesn't have a label, and you're both good with that. You don't need to be exclusive. You're just having fun. You're thinking, why make things complicated? Maybe dating is so far from your priorities right now. You have goals, you have ambitions, and you feel like maybe dating would just get in the way. You're thinking, why worry about something that isn't important to my life right now? I'm not going to get married anytime soon, okay? Maybe you look around in your world right now, and there isn't anyone that you'd be interested in dating. You're open to it, but no one comes to mind. You're thinking, why obsess over a lack of viable options right now, right? Or maybe you're a serial dater, and you can't remember the last time that you were single for more than a few days. You don't even know what it's like to not be interested in someone. Or maybe you know exactly who you'd want to date, but they just aren't interested in you. And you're thinking, why, dear God, have you forsaken me? Right? Okay, well, maybe not that. But regardless of how you would rate your interest in dating right now, from single forever to waiting on your soulmate, chances are favorable that a lot of us are going to date at some point in our lives. And if you're going to have a relationship one day, what we're talking about today can give you the best shot at having a great experience when you do. So let me be honest with you. The Bible doesn't talk directly about the idea of dating in the way that we talk about it today, right? But despite a lack of explicit, crystal clear instruction, there are still very important and helpful things that we can learn from the scriptures when it comes to dating well. Today, we're going to look at a practical section of the Old Testament called Proverbs. If you've been around for any period of time, you've read this or heard us talk about it. It's an entire book dedicated to wisdom, which is just being able to discern what is right or good or best given a particular set of circumstances, right? Most of these Proverbs were written by King Solomon, who was in the Old Testament. He wrote a lot of it, and he actually was known as the wisest king who ever lived because God gave him extra wisdom. You can go read that story. He's incredibly wise and has a lot of insight on pretty much every area of life. But just like all of us, he was human, and he had to learn some things the hard way. So one bit of wisdom that Solomon records in Proverbs chapter 24 actually applies to this topic very well. Put your outdoor work in order and get your fields ready. After that, build your house. I know you're probably asking, what does that have to do with dating? And I'll tell you in a minute, but just go with me for a second here. Have you ever seen a big tractor clearing out a piece of land before something is built on it? Right, this happens after blueprints and architectural plans are created. After the land is cleared, then a foundation is laid, all while supplies and tools are gathered. All this happens before the house is built. I think that is the wisdom that Solomon writes here. Wisdom can be relevant to us today by 1, preparing your land so that you can build a strong, stable house, and then 2, get to work on building your strong and stable house. Right? A big part of building a house happens before the walls ever go up. Well, you probably just want to start building immediately. You don't want to skip steps or move too quickly. When we take the time to build the best foundation that we can, we have the best potential to move forward. And to move forward, well, just like this video that I'm recording, I had to do the work and prepare what I was going to say before I ever set up any camera equipment and hit record. Preparation is the foundation on which success is built. And while that all sounds good, we all struggle at times to do this, right? We know that we have a big test coming up maybe, but we don't study until 10 minutes before, right? We know that we need a certain GPA to get into the college or whatever school we're wanting to get into or whatever, but we don't really start taking grades seriously until maybe the middle of your junior year, right? We know we have a big recital maybe or tryouts coming up or whatever, but we don't start preparing until just a few days before. Right? We know this instinctively, and this applies to all areas of life. We all do it, and we all have things that we could be better at, and it can be tempting to look for the easy route, but life just doesn't work out that way. If we want things to operate at their full potential, which we all do when it comes to our relationships, and especially dating, then we need to take the best steps that we can in order to get this right and build a firm foundation and a good house. We understand this when it comes to all areas of life, but when it comes to the more abstract things like a relationship and how to make that work, it seems like you just throw yourself into a relationship and you get to know each other better and it'll work or it won't. But relationships are just as predictable in a lot of ways as anything else, as long as you build a strong foundation. Right? You've probably heard the statistic that 50% of marriages end in divorce, right? But that doesn't mean that you, when you get to marry the right person, have a 50-50 shot at it, right? You can slight the odds in your favor. The reality is 50% of people don't build a good foundation before they ever enter into the relationship to begin with. And therefore, their marriage fails. It's not as if like everything was all fine and dandy and the way it was supposed to be, and then they got married and then it fell apart. No, a lot of it happens before the vows are even said. So how in the world do we apply this to dating practically? 1 is you have to prepare yourself so that you can build a strong and healthy relationship. Then you can get to work building a strong and healthy relationship. It's really that simple. It's not a trick question, right? We don't like that answer sometimes because it seems too simple, and we want the complicated like answers that give us more steps than that. And these trust me, can go many layers deep, and the better you know yourself and know how flawed you are, the more steps you know to take, right? It's not the fancy, glamorous route that a lot of people would want to talk about, but at the end of the day, you got to work on you first. And it's surprising to me how many of us don't recognize that, right? This can make all the difference in the world when it comes to dating. Relationships can play a big role in shaping who you become. And whether things work out with a special someone or you eventually go your separate ways, the decisions you make while you date and beforehand can and will shape you in the future. I like to think about it like this. Who you date may be temporary, but who you become is lasting. See, we are laying the foundation of who we become today, our faith, our character, our choices, and yes, God is always in the process helping us grow and change. But if we want to have the best dating potential that we can, it starts with us taking a hard look at ourselves instead of just waiting on another person. We can lay the foundation to becoming the kind of person that we want to be, whether or not things work out with the particular person that we're dating in the moment. So next, I want us to take a look at these words written by the Apostle Paul all about love. Right? He was the person who wrote most of the New Testament and was one of the most influential leaders in the church. This is what he writes. He says, love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. Isn't this what we all want when we think about love? Most of us hear that list and think, okay, if I could just find someone like that, then things would go perfectly, right? And that's what we do. We think about other people before we think about ourselves. Well, that might be true. It's helpful when somebody else has that figured out. Sometimes it's just easier to think about that than about ourselves. So what does 1 Corinthians 13 mean for you and for me? It means that before we start looking for these incredible qualities in somebody else, maybe we should be focusing on becoming that kind of person right now. Learning to live that way and becoming the type of person Paul writes about here is helpful whether you're dating or not. It's like preparing a piece of ground before building the house. Being patient, kind, and humble will make everything better, stronger, and healthy. Our friendships, families, and our potential dating life all apply to this, right? We tend to think that when we meet the right person, we'll just magically treat that person well. But the truth is, when it comes to loving someone well, it takes practice. We don't become patient and kind overnight, and we won't become patient or kind by accident. It takes effort, and it takes that preparation. So work on becoming the person that the person you're looking for is looking for. Regardless of where you're at when it comes to dating, just know that it's never too late to work on this. Even if you're in a relationship already and things have been tough, making a decision now to start moving in the direction that Paul lays out is exactly the kind of wisdom that Solomon was pointing to. And if you aren't dating yet, or choose not to date at all, it might even be better. This is the perfect time for you to put in the work. So here are 2 practical steps to get started. 1, choose who you want to work on becoming, right? A lot of us think as long as we're attracted to each other, then we're good. But you can't clear a field and build a strong, stable house with only a hammer, right? It requires a variety of different tools, maybe a tape measure or a box knife or screwdriver, right? There's all kinds of things. You need all these different tools to help you out and build your house, right? There's no one-size-fits-all tool for getting things done the right way. Right, 1 Corinthians 13 is like preparing your field and building your house. You have different important tools for building. Love, patience, kindness, right? Love is not jealous. It doesn't demand its own way. While it might be amazing to meet someone who possesses all of these qualities, becoming someone who is building these qualities into themselves is even better. And even if the dating relationship doesn't work out, you will still have shaped and built a great house. So number 2 is just practice, right? Paul gave us a lot of options to work with, so it might be easiest to shrink it down a bit. Maybe this week, I just want you to focus on 2 of those qualities that he talked about. All right, go ahead and get out your phones, open that notes app, and write down the 2 qualities that you want to work on this week. Maybe it's being patient and kind. Maybe it's being humble and forgiving. Maybe it's being hopeful and gentle. I know 2 doesn't seem like a whole lot, but it can be tough to live out, as you know. So just work on 1 or 2 at a time, baby steps. And whether you're dating or not, you can practice them with everyone that you interact with. If you do date someday, things won't always be easy. The person you date will get on your nerves or not seem so perfect, and being patient and kind might become difficult. But if you start building those qualities into your life right now, they'll come a lot easier when you need them. Right? Practicing any of the qualities in 1 Corinthians 13 can have a huge impact on your relationships and ultimately your own life. So instead of spending time and energy finding the right someone faster, spend time building your own foundation to be stronger, right? Because at your age, who you date may be temporary, but who you are becoming is lasting. I love you guys. You're going to finish this discussion in your groups, and I'll see you back here next week.